Okay, let's be real for a second. When you think of the phrase sexual fantasy, whose mind do you think we immediately jump to? A man's, right? We're kind of conditioned to believe it's this whole guy-centric universe. We picture men daydreaming about all sorts of wild scenarios, but women? The stereotype is that they're all about romance, connection, emotions, maybe a candlelit dinner, not so much the wild stuff. But what if I told you that's one of the biggest myths out there? What if the inner world of a woman's desire is just as colorful and maybe even more surprising?
You've hit on something truly fascinating. And you're absolutely right. That stereotype is pervasive, but it's incredibly outdated. The truth is, women have rich, complex, and very vivid fantasy lives. The landscape of a woman's mind is a vast and private place, and what happens in there can be just as explicit and daring as any man's fantasy. A really insightful study confirmed this, looking at nearly 700 women. The results really opened people's eyes to what women actually think about behind closed doors.
All right, I'm intrigued. So you're saying it's not all just flowers and slow dancing? But hang on a minute. When we talk about these fantasies, isn't there a fine line between a fantasy and an actual desire? If a woman is fantasizing about something, let's say something a bit extreme, doesn't that mean on some level she actually wants to do it?
That is the single most important distinction to make, and it's the most common misconception. The researchers on that study were very clear about this. They said, and I'm paraphrasing here, these results highlight a crucial difference between sexual fantasy and sexual desire. Think of it like this. You can enjoy a thrilling action movie where the hero jumps out of a burning building. You might feel the adrenaline, the excitement, the suspense. But do you actually want to jump out of a burning building yourself? Of course not. A fantasy is a mental playground. It's a safe space to explore ideas, feelings, and scenarios without any of the real-world risks or consequences. It's about the story, the emotion, the thrill of the thought itself, not a to-do list.
A mental playground. I like that. It makes sense. So it's more about the experience in your head. Okay, then let's get into it. The study you mentioned, what did it find? What's actually on the playlist in this mental playground? Give me the number one, the top hit. I'm guessing something super romantic, right? Like being swept off her feet by a handsome prince on a tropical island.
That's a lovely image, but not quite what the data shows. The most common fantasy, reported by a staggering 82% of women, is actually about adventure and risk. It's the fantasy of being intimate in an unusual or forbidden place.
82%? That's huge. So we're not talking about a different room in the house. We're talking, what, the office after hours, an elevator, a public restroom? I mean, my mind is racing now. I'll never look at a quiet corner in a library the same way again. What's the psychology behind that one?
It's the thrill of the taboo. It's the excitement of almost being caught. It breaks the monotony of everyday life. In our structured, often predictable lives, the idea of doing something so spontaneous and rebellious, even just in our minds, is incredibly liberating. It's a pure, potent hit of adrenaline and a break from the norm.
Wow. Okay. Mind slightly blown already. What's next on the list? What's number two?
The second most popular fantasy, which was reported by over half of the women, around 56.5%, involves multiple partners, a group setting.
Pesta sex, as we might say. So a threesome or something even bigger. And who are these other partners in the fantasy?
It varies. For many, the fantasy involves being with both men and women. The core appeal here isn't always just the physical act itself. It can be about feeling overwhelmingly desired, being the absolute center of attention and adoration. For others, it's a curiosity about different dynamics, a way to explore bisexuality or fluidity in a completely safe, private setting. It's the ultimate experience of being wanted without any of the real-life complications.
That makes a lot of sense, framing it as being the center of desire. Okay, moving down the list, I saw a word in the original findings, pasra, the idea of surrender, of submission, something like being tied up. That sounds pretty intense. How common is that?
It's quite common. About 52% of women fantasize about being in a submissive role, and that can indeed include scenarios like being restrained or blindfolded. Now, it's crucial to understand this is almost never about a genuine desire to be heard or helpless. In fact, it's often the opposite. For many women who are expected to be in control of everything in their lives, their career, the household, the family schedule, the idea of letting go is incredibly appealing.
So it's a vacation from responsibility.
Exactly. It's about trust. It's about handing over control to a partner you trust implicitly, allowing you to turn off your brain and just feel. It's a fantasy of pure sensory experience without the pressure of having to perform or lead. It's a deep form of mental and physical release.
Okay, what about the complete opposite of a trusted partner? I read that nearly half of women, around 49%, fantasize about a one-night stand with a complete stranger. No names, no history, just a single night. What's the appeal there?
Anonymity. It's a powerful aphrodisiac. A stranger represents a blank slate. There are no preconceived notions, no history to live up to, and no future expectations. You can be a completely different version of yourself for a few hours. It's a fantasy of total freedom and uninhibitedness, without any social or emotional baggage. Pure escape.
This is all incredibly eye-opening. What else did they find? Any same-sex fantasies?
Yes, that was present too. Around 42% of women reported having a fantasy of watching two other women being intimate. For many heterosexual women who have this fantasy, it's often less about a direct personal desire, but more about aesthetics and sensuality. It's perceived as beautiful, sensual, and sometimes less intimidating or competitive to watch than a male-female scene. There's an appreciation for the form and the connection enjoyed from a safe observer's perspective.
All right, this last one I saw on the list was probably the most surprising to me, even though the percentage was smaller, around 12.5%, the fantasy of being a sex worker, or perhaps flipping it, and being with a gigolo. That seems so counterintuitive.
It does on the surface, doesn't it? But let's look at the power dynamic. In the fantasy of hiring a male escort, for example, the woman is the one in complete control. She is the client. She is paying for a service that is focused entirely on her pleasure, with no requirement for her to cater to her partner's ego or emotional needs. It completely inverts the traditional script where women have historically been seen as the ones who need to please. It's a fantasy about absolute transactional power and unapologetic focus on her own gratification.
Wow. So at the end of the day, it's all about control, escape, desire, and breaking taboos, but all safely within the walls of your own mind. This completely changes the way I think about the topic. It's not simple at all. It's deeply complex and, frankly, far more interesting than the stereotypes.
Precisely. The key takeaway should be that the human mind is our ultimate freedom. Fantasies are a normal, healthy, and vital part of sexuality for everyone. They are not instructions or confessions. They are stories we tell ourselves to feel excited, to escape, to explore power dynamics, or to simply feel wanted. There is nothing to be ashamed of. They are your private world, and that is perfectly, wonderfully okay.